What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, I am excited for this episode. Last time we talked about Atlantis. It was a rather interesting one.
Yeah, the sea peoples.
Led us to the possibility that we all might be Atlanteans.
We all are Atlanteans, Mateo. All of us. So, like you said, the last time we talked about the Atlanteans, we were talking about these sea peoples. What would this group that was called sea peoples? They waged war with the Greeks, and I think it was 3 different generations of ancient Egyptians they waged war with as well. But they were known as the sea people because they would attack by boats and come from the sea. But they never really talked about where these people came from. But there is actually references in ancient Egyptian, I don't want to say writings, but hieroglyphs that were found on a wall that reference survivors from an island civilization that was swallowed by the ocean. And the survivors were said to have moved to the Nile Delta to colonize. And this was approximately 12,000 years ago. To get more specific, it was 11,600 years ago. But they moved once their capital had been swallowed by the ocean, they moved towards the Nile Delta. And with their colonization, that was said to have eventually become what we know as dynastic ancient Egypt. But the story of Atlantis, what we know of Atlantis, is that it was an island nation or an island country or whatever, and that it sunk below the waves of the ocean. So everybody assumes we're going to find Atlantis at the bottom of the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. And according to Plato, it was near the Pillars of Heracles, which is the Strait of Gibraltar.
Just like Namor said.
But I just want to run down some things that Plato said about the city, so that I can make this comparison for you guys. So the capital of Atlantis, it had 3 rings of water and 2 rings of land that surrounded an island, and it opened up to the sea to the south of where this place was. It was said to have mountains to the north with rivers that ran through them, and it was said to be surrounded by a large plain on all sides. So where after the rings of water, on the other side of those rings of water would be, according to legend, would be plains. And the main city was said to be constructed with red, black, and white rocks. And Plato also made reference to elephants being abundant in the area. And there was also an abundance of exotic fruits and vegetables that were to be found on Atlantis. The Atlanteans were also known to have an abundance of semi-precious metals such as iron and copper, but they also had an abundance of gold. And this was something they were able to mine from natural deposits within the area. So we know that Atlantis was an island. So what a lot of people assume is that the island was likely swallowed by the ocean or it collapsed or something. But it's interesting to note that in the Egyptian writings, they reference this date that was around 12,000 years ago, so 11,600 years ago. This date's important because this is around the time of the Younger Dryas, which was a cataclysmic event. It occurred after the Ice Age, where there was a large glacial melt, which created these floods, and it created an abrupt change in the climate of the entire globe. There was a lot of cooling that happened, but it was because of melted glacier waters that's led to high flooding. And we see evidence of this throughout a lot of places in North America, in Europe. We've seen it, and there's certain areas of the world where you can actually see where the glaciers, as they were melting, they carved out like a channel, or in other cases where there was heavy flooding, and the ground now has this like ripple effect where it almost looks like waves on the land, but it was because at one point it was completely flooded. So if you've got this island and you've got all this flooding going on, you chances are this island would end up flooding. Now, there's this place in Africa in the Saharan desert. It's called the Richat structure, or also known as the Eye of the Sahara. It's located in Mauritania, which is in Western Africa. We'll post these pictures on Instagram and in the show notes and all that. But this structure is, for one, just to give you a scale, this ring structure is 29 miles wide, and they're symmetrical circles. And if you follow the circles, you'll see that there are 3 rings that would have contained water and 2 rings of land with land space in the middle. In a lot of the satellite pictures and aerial shots, in the rings you can see these like white deposits. And what those deposits are is salt, which would be evident if at one point this had ocean water that would have come into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see from the overhead shots that there is, to like the southwest, you can see a distinct path where water would have traveled. And there's a lot of salt deposits in that area. So that matches with this description of Atlantis. But to go one step further, Atlantis itself was said to have be surrounded by this plain, like I said, on both sides. On both sides of this structure, it's now desert. It's now part of the Sahara Desert. But if it were to have been a grassy, tropical type setting, this would be plains on all sides. And there was actually research that's been done, I believe, by MIT, that they actually did research on the Sahara Desert, and they found that it goes in these 20,000 year cycles where it'll shift from complete desert to like this tropical oasis. So if Atlantis were to have existed within that time period when it was a tropical oasis, it would be on both sides of the structure, outside of the rings of water, would have been these huge, vast green plains for hundreds of miles on both sides. So that matches there. And in the area around the Richat structure, there are mountains to the north called the Atlas Mountains, and I'll get more into that because that becomes significant in the story of Atlantis and the fact that it may have been real. But in these mountains, there's evidence of erosion from rivers. There's no longer any rivers flowing through these mountains, but we know what water erosion looks like, and there's evidence of rivers that at one point in time flowed through these mountains. So that's another match with Atlantis, because Plato said that to the north was a mountain range that had rivers, and here we are. There's mountains, the Atlas Mountains, and evidence of rivers flowing through them. So I mean, it just gets more and more crazy the more that you start seeing these things that are popping out. Another thing was that Atlantis was said to have been constructed with red and black and white rocks. And all around this area, there's colored stones that have been found in the desert. Some of them just have different colored edges. Some of them are completely one color. But all around this area, colored stones.
Like a mosaic effect of rubble.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'd have to think if there was a sudden flood, like say a tsunami that occurred, or just like a flash flood that came through and washed everything away, you would especially if it was seawater, the salt in seawater is very corrosive, and that would have dispersed any foundations or buildings that were there. And as the waters receded, it would have carried a lot of that debris with it. And as it became a desert, they would have just been deposited in the sands.
Right.
And this area also, even today, is in Mauritania, but this entire region, there's elephants that live in this area. And there have been for thousands of years. In fact, there's even a cave painting that was found close to the reshot structure that dates back thousands of years that has a elephant depicted on the wall. So elephants are known to have existed in this region for many thousands of years. So if this area was, which again MIT has shown that this area was once lush and tropical, it would make sense that there'd be elephants there. And if you've got this lush tropical climate, it would also make sense that there would be exotic fruits and vegetables that were grown there.
Yeah, and people wanting to settle there, right?
Yeah. I mean, wherever there's going to be a source of food and resources, that you're going to have people that want to settle there, especially if you've got an empire like Atlantis. There was bound to be, even though the capital was said to be right there were bound to be like satellite cities around the area and things that were benefiting from their proximity to Atlantis.
Right. It was obviously luscious enough to build an entire kingdom there.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any other area. We know with the Nile, when the Nile floods, everything becomes fertile and they're able to grow whatever they need. And that's why they built a civilization on the Nile, because everything was there that you need to support a civilization. So it would make sense if this was a similar thing. This was like a tropical oasis, and you've got everything you need. You've got your center of power on this island, and everyone's spread out from there. Sounds pretty sweet until the fucking glaciers melt and then drown everybody. Yeah, that's the way it goes, man. You fucking set up your empire on an island. Eventually, you're gonna flood, man.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time humans have picked a bad spot to settle.
Yeah, and well, I mean, in the mythology, it was built by Poseidon himself.
It was his fault.
The king of the sea. Maybe he's just like, what, fuck you guys. And he just started splashing them, and they're like, no, leave me alone. Why are you splashing me, Poseidon, you son of a bitch?
What if they got too advanced and Poseidon did wipe them out?
So that's the weirdest thing to me about Atlantis is the thing with them being like a super advanced culture, because it's not really like everyone talks about, or I shouldn't say everyone. It's really more of like a new age thing, I think, with the Atlanteans being like, yeah, the advanced crystal fucking magic peace and love society. But there was a thing, I haven't read the book. I just vaguely heard about it, about the like Atlanteans cloning dinosaurs and maybe also having sex with dinosaur clones?
Yes. Maybe.
Maybe, potentially, probably.
Huh. Why would they want to have sex with them?
I don't know. I'm sure it's just some crazy bullshit that means nothing.
It would be cool if it was like real life Dinotopia and they just were like farming with stegosauruses.
Yeah, maybe. Using the Triceratops to plow the fields.
Yeah, that's what happened to the Atlanteans. Their beast of burden turned on them and then just dove into the ocean and became Nessies.
Yeah, that's what happened. That is certified fact.
That's what we're revealing tonight.
The truth is revealed. It was the dinosaurs. I wish. That'd be amazing. But there's I mean, right now, like I'm really convinced about this. There's this YouTube channel, and I don't know if any of our listeners are into like weird like it's not so much paranormal. It's about like alternate takes on ancient history.
What's the name of this channel?
It's called Bright Insight, and he got a lot of like a couple of years ago. He actually got a lot of publicity because of his the research he's done on this structure potentially being Atlantis. But he talks a lot about that, and he gets into a lot of cool stuff about the pyramids and things like that. So if you're into this, definitely check him out. I got a lot of this information from his stuff. He's got I think like 3 videos, maybe 4 videos on this structure alone, and they're all like 20 to 30 minutes long. So he's got a lot of information on this, and this is like his not so much the structure, but just like ancient history and how things might be older than they really are. They're kind of in the same vein as the things as like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson get into. And Randall Carlson has actually looked at the area and in his opinion, because Randall Carlson's a geologist, in his opinion, it looks like, based on what he's seeing with the indentations in the land and the way that everything kind of flows, is that it shows evidence of a cataclysm occurring in that area.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's evident that at some point there was a flood that occurred here. Whether or not you want to say it was actually Atlantis, I guess you can look at the evidence and make the decision yourself. But a couple more things about that. One being Plato referenced an abundance of metals such as iron, copper, and gold. 3 of the biggest exports from Mauritania is iron, copper, and gold. And that's the country where the Richat structure exists. So right there, you've got another really big thing that lines up. And one of the other things that really kind of, to me, this is like the biggest thing. In, I think it was 500 BC. Yeah, that sounds about right. 500 BC. The historian Herodotus, there was a map that was drawn that represented the world as it was known at that point in time, and it was based on his records. He didn't actually draw the map, but the map was drawn based on the records that he had put together on all of the known world. But it contains a lot of Europe, parts of Asia, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East. And on this map, he references the Celts, which we all agree existed. He shows the Caucasus, the Caspian Sea. We all know those are real things. He shows the Arabian Gulf, which I believe is between Egypt and Israel. And then he shows part of Ethiopia, but then over to the west of Africa, where he writes the pillars, which again are the pillars of Heracles, or the Strait of Gibraltar, as it came to be known. But he writes Atlantis. He spells it a little different. He spells it with an E, an ES instead of an IS. But again, this is the west of Africa, which would be where Mauritania is now, which is where the reshot structure is, which is, the spiral shape that perfectly matches what Plato had referenced.
Yeah, we read Plato's stuff on Atlantis pretty thoroughly. And I mean, that's that reshot structure. That's fucking it, man.
Yeah. So you want to hear some crazier connections that go into Greek mythology that link this to the same area?
Dude, hell yeah. I mean, this is
All
pretty
right.
mind-blowing as it is. To see these photos, and the computer generated like a restored version of it. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not far-fetched at all. I mean,
No,
just
not
look
at
at
all.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And all right. So I mentioned earlier that Atlantis was said to have been built by Poseidon, who was the god of the ocean. Now, Atlantis itself, a common misconception is that Atlantis was just this island, and that's all it was. But Atlantis was actually an empire that consisted of 10 kingdoms. And coincidentally, Poseidon had 10 children. So each child would be the ruler of one of the kingdoms of Atlantis, but his firstborn would be able to rule the capital of Atlantis, which was this island surrounded by the rings. And Poseidon's firstborn son was Atlas. So we're all familiar with the marble statue of Atlas, but Atlas was said to have been the firstborn, so he would have been the ruler of the capital of Atlantis. Now, coincidentally, the first king of Mauritania, do you know what his name was?
Let me hear it.
His name was King Atlas.
Oh shit! I thought it was going to be close. Not King Atlas.
No, his name was King Atlas. And as I mentioned earlier, the mountain range to the north of the Reshot structure is called the Atlas Mountains.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, this seems pretty indisputable. And there are some things that they kind of go against it, like the fact that it's over 1,000 feet above sea level now. But at one point in time, this area could have been volcanic, and volcanic activity underneath the ground would cause the ground to raise because of the molten stone that would then cool and create rock, which would raise the land above it.
Yeah, literally create landmass.
Yeah. But the fact that there's evidence of flooding and there's these salt deposits kind of show that at one point this was either at or below sea level.
In the photo that has the digital reconstruction, all on the whole southern end of this circle and going up in those grooves to the right, that's all salt.
Yeah, with those white areas, that's salt. Those are salt deposits.
And that's 29 miles wide, or
29 miles wide. Yeah.
That's a huge amount of salt.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's actually a group of people that collect the salt and transport it, sell it.
Wow, I want some of that salt.
Yeah, it's sea salt.
Atlantean sea salt.
Yeah.
It's going to make my eyebrows super thin and super archy. Give me pointy ears.
Maybe some wings on your heels.
Yeah. Make me a total asshole.
Yeah. Try to bang Reed Richards' wife all the time, too. So Do you want to hear about the weird CIA stuff?
Yes, I'm excited about this part specifically. Especially knowing all the stuff you've said already. Holy crap.
Well, so let me preface this by saying that the CIA documents that were declassified aren't specifically talking about Atlantis. They're discussing more the reshot structure.
Okay.
But to me, what's weirder is what's left out than anything. In 1967, the CIA ran these covert missions, and they were sending these state-of-the-art, at the time, spy craft over these different points around the world, studying. They were looking for geomagnetic anomalies within the different areas of the world. There were, I believe it was 12 different areas that were being observed. And one of these sites was the reshot structure. And the documents that were detailing the mission itself were declassified. So we know what the goal of the mission was, and where the places were that they were searching, what they were, how they were doing it. We know all the details of the mission itself, but the results and the findings from the mission were never declassified. And what little was declassified was heavily redacted.
That's what I was going to ask. You said the stuff that's missing. I was wondering if it was redacted or just not included.
Well, they didn't release any of the results of this study, which seems pretty strange if they would declassify the mission itself.
Right.
They know what they released what they were looking for, what the goal of the mission was, but they didn't release the findings. But here's a really weird part of this whole thing. There was a section on the report, and I'm just going to quote exactly what the section says. While the scientific aspects of this survey are totally unclassified and available to the worldwide scientific community. And then everything else on the page is redacted.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah. So they don't even finish that line. Like, they start, while the scientific aspects of the survey are totally unclassified and available to the worldwide scientific community, blank.
Wow.
So none of this was unclassified or available to the worldwide scientific community. And so that part of the report takes place about a third of the way down the page. And then after that, it's all blank, and the redaction continues on to the second page. So the entire rest of that part of the report is completely redacted. And then to make matters weirder, around the same time as these covert missions were taking place, there was a secret CIA meeting where there was a book called The Adam and Eve Story by Chan Thomas was being discussed. And there's a lot of, like, if you look online, there's a lot of people that say or claim that the book itself was classified, but the book's not classified. I don't know if you can find it. It's probably out of print. You might be able to find a PDF, maybe. I don't know. I didn't look too hard for it, but in this book, the author describes a cataclysm which buried Atlantis, and he noted that this cataclysm itself took place around 11,600 years ago. And this book was written in 1965.
What?
Yeah. So it's just kind of weird that they held this meeting. The weirdest thing about this meeting was that they declassified that they were discussing this book, but it's classified the reason why they were talking about the book in the meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like, think about that. They're like, yeah, we discussed this book, but we can't tell you why. That's classified.
It's almost like they're being as obvious as they can so people can figure it out.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
But this date is interesting though, because this is a date, again, like I mentioned earlier, that transpires with the or corresponds with the Younger Dryas event. And I believe I've discussed that on the show before. Sometime I would really like to do a show on weirdness with the pyramids. I'm not going to get into that now, but at some point down the line, I do want to get into that because there's a lot of really cool stuff with the pyramids. But to get to Egypt, again, I want to reference the legend in Egypt that says that people from this area that lived on an island that was flooded moved to the Nile Delta and began to colonize. There's an argument that the Sphinx is considerably older than what we generally agree that it is. And what a lot of people point to is the fact that there is water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure. And a lot of the mainstream Egyptologists and historians try to claim that it's sand erosion. But when you take pictures without any context and show it to a geologist, the geologist says it looks like it's rain erosion. Now, as we know, Egypt is in the middle of a desert. It's not known for its wet climate, but it was a wet climate around 12,000 years ago, which would have been the same period of time that Atlantis existed.
Right.
And the same period of time where this whole area would have been like a tropical jungle or rainforest type situation. So it would have had a lot of rainwater. And it also, if there's flooding, you would have the flood waters that would erode it as well. So it kind of supports this idea that there was civilization that existed long before we knew it. We tend to think of Mesopotamia as being, the oldest civilization, Babylon and Samaria, but this whole story predates that by a few thousand years.
Jeez.
And even in the story that Plato told, he mentions Solaris showing up in Egypt, or I'm sorry, not Solaris, Solon showing up in Egypt in 600 BC, and that's where Solon found out about the story of Atlantis, which was then later related to Plato. But in 6000 BC, it was said that Atlantis had been destroyed 9,000 years prior to that. So if you fast forward to now, that would make that 11,600 years ago.
Wow.
So a lot of things line up around this time period. Also, we have Göbekli Tepe, which we think is around 12,000 years old, maybe 12,500 years old. But we know 1,000 years after it was created, it was buried. So if it was 12,500 years old and 1,000 years later they buried it, that's 11,500. Or, maybe they were off by 100 years, and 11,600 years ago matches up again.
Man.
So I don't know what the hell the CIA was doing over these areas. It's especially they're looking for geomagnetic anomalies, but to what end? And why have they classified what they discovered? What's so secretive? What are they doing? Why does that have to be classified or redacted? Why can't they report on that? Especially when they start their report saying that it will be shared with the scientific community worldwide.
Right. Them classifying it begs the question of why are you classifying anything when it comes to researching for magnetic field areas? That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, and what are you looking to do with those geomagnetic areas? What's going on there?
Man.
It makes me, I don't know if you ever watched Lost, but it makes me think of Lost with the geomagnetic anomalies. And they're looking for these gateway areas, and maybe that's linked to it.
Has anybody been studying this place recently?
I don't know. I don't know what the general consensus is. But I mean, this place is so big, it can be seen from space. They're able to see that in space. There's plenty of, like, if you just Google Eye of the Sahara, you'll find plenty of really cool pictures, satellite images and the like. But this whole story is really interesting, and I always found it weird that people are just like, oh, Atlantis, it's a big fucking myth. Like, why is it so weird to consider that maybe there is a place that we aren't aware of? You know, it makes perfect sense with the way things change over time, and I mean, we think of the Middle Ages, you know, or the Renaissance as being so old, and you know, it was like 500 to 900 years ago, and we're talking 12,000 years ago.
Yeah,
like it might as well be the dinosaurs.
Exactly.
To some people, you know, like it's just so far removed from what we can even conceive of.
Yeah, it becomes incomprehensible for sure.
Yeah. Might as well be 1,000,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it just seems like as time goes on, there's more and more evidence that suggests that human civilization is much older than we think it is. And I mean, you can even look at things like the out of place artifacts, for instance. And I mean, some of those date back millions of years, and I know you could make an argument, like a skeptic argument, against human artifacts from millions of years, but some of them just date back to a time before we thought civilization existed, and yet there's a fucking knife or a sword that exists from like 100,000 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. It just, to me, I think we've got a very different idea of what the Earth was like. I mean, I if I'm remembering correctly, as recent as 10,000 years ago, or maybe it was 50,000. I don't know. Never mind. But pretty recently, in a relatively speaking, there was a period of time when there were humans that existed on this earth along with other species of hominids. So we like to think of these other species of hominids as being like cavemen. Like we think of Neanderthals as being cavemen, or anything that predates that as just being like these brutish, primitive proto-humans. And I think a lot of that is based on just the way their skeletons were built. They were more, I don't want to say ape-like, but more similar to primates than what our modern human bodies are like. And I think because of that, they equated them as being cavemen or savages or whatever. But what if they were? What if these other species had civilizations and we were late to the party? You know, there were already civilizations existing, and we were coming up, and we're like, oh shit, look at you guys got it figured out. And then we figured it out, and then we banged those other species out of existence and became the dominant species that now plagues the earth.
Yeah, I mean, even if they did settle, how fast would that, you know, their pure bloodline have been bred out?
Yeah, and it's, to this day, you can take a DNA test and you can see how much Neanderthal DNA you have in you, in each person. It's crazy.
Yeah. So
I mean, it still exists within all of us, and that's evidence that we basically banged the competition out of existence. But who knows? I mean, maybe modern human were the actual savages, Because, I mean, you look at it, and as a species, we really haven't evolved. I mean, yeah, technologically speaking, we have, but we still go to war with each other all the time over fucking bullshit. We still squabble over resources, and we put things that are bullshit over things that are truly and actually important. So maybe we were the warlike assholes and that just fucked and killed everything else out of existence. And then what we're left with, we're like, oh shit, we've got the ruins of this civilization that they had. Let's make the best out of it. And then, we've got modern society as a result. And win, maybe, for us. Probably lose for the planet because we fucking suck. And God forbid we ever make it to space and start fucking and killing aliens out of existence.
I know. Can you imagine like the first huge transport ship carrying people to like a new planet to settle on or something like that, and just all like the first trip, how many like trash ejections they're gonna have to do along the way, waste and shit.
It'll be gross. Yeah. Hopefully they all got their COVID vaccines so they're ready for baby implementation.
That's why they're going.
They're like, we got our shots and we're getting implanted with babies. And that's what they do. The aliens are waiting just beyond our atmosphere. So like as soon as that transport ship gets out, they're going to board and they're going to impregnate everybody.
Yeah, we've messed up our planet so much that it's irradiating a field of trashiness and filth. So they have to get out to a certain distance.
Yeah, they're like we're not getting close enough to have to breathe in your filth, but we'll be close enough that we can prevent you from getting further, and in order to make sure that you don't go out among the stars, we will impregnate you with our children, and eventually our children will become the dominant species on the planet.
Yep.
And then you guys can fuck off. And that's the goal. Humans, fuck off.
Well, guys, Mike's just revealed, they don't like foul smells or filth. All we got to do if the aliens come to invade, every one of us just close your eyes, concentrate, think together, and fart at the same time.
Yeah, but remember those videos from the 90s with the UFOs that were sucking up ocean water?
Yeah.
It's so that they can spray down all of you filthy fuckers. They're going to just hose you all down, and you're not going to stand a chance. And while you're busy washing ocean salt out of your eyes, you're impregnated. That's their whole goal, is to just catch us off guard and impregnate us all. So even if you don't get a COVID vaccine, you're going to get seawater in the face and then a baby in your basket.
Yeah, what if they don't need the vaccine to do it? What if they're just shining lights on our stomachs?
The vaccine just makes it easier, Mateo. That's all. It just makes it easier. It's inevitable. It's like Thanos.
It's like prenatal pills. That's all.
Yeah, that perfect way to put it. You're prepping the area for implementation, whereas these other assholes, you actually have to work for it because you're being stubborn.
Well, just let us know how your pregnancy go, guys. Mine's bitey. We know that.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced that that's a side effect of the pregnancy.
It's been there. It's always been there.
In fact, I'm not even pregnant.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.